Yo guys, welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to switch it up a little bit and kind of go over my rod and reel arsenal. Just talk a little bit about my favorite rod and reel setups that I use for steelhead and salmon fishing when it comes to like fall, winter, and springtime. So we're going to get right into it. I have 4 go-to setups that I use on a weekly basis. These are my 4 favorite rods that I use and reels, and they both work for every application, whether it comes to bottom bouncing or float fishing. So let's get right into it. Alright, so my first setup here is my center pin setup. This is probably my favorite way to catch steelhead or big salmon on the rivers. So I like to use this for float fishing, obviously. This is probably the only setup I would say is only good for float fishing. I wouldn't recommend bottom bouncing with this. What I have on here is a Sheffield center pin. It's a S102. And I have it spooled up with some 14-pound Trilene XL. It works very well, and I don't like that fancy line that people use. They like to use the bright colored line. I like to be more subtle and just use the regular plain white line. This is also a pretty cool time to give a shout out to my buddy Josh Rolifson. He's the one that handmade these custom knobs for me. And the first set he sent out to me were a little bit squeaky. And I let him know that they were a little squeaky, and he sent out a fresh pair for me, free of charge too. So he definitely stands by his product, guys. If you haven't checked him out yet, look him up on Facebook and let him know Vince sent you. And then as far as the rod goes, this is just a cheap little Lamiglas X11. This is a 12-foot, 6 to 12-pound rod. It's very slow action, so it's awesome to fight fish on. Very good action on the rod. And on this one here, I have one of my another buddy of mine. His name is Brian Smith. He makes these custom floats. This one here is, I think, a 20-gram float, so I like to use this for the big water when the water's pushing pretty high. So that pretty much covers the first setup that I got here. Like I said, Sheffield 102 with a Lamiglas X11 12-foot rod. So probably my favorite setup out of my arsenal, but we're going to get into the next 3. Alright, so the next setup here is my bait casting setup for salmon and steelhead. I like to keep this on me every time when we're boat fishing, just because sometimes when there's longer casts that need to be made out, it's a lot tougher to cast out a center pin setup and bomb those casts out there, so I always keep this on me. This here is just a Shimano convergence rod. This is a 10-6, and it's a slow action rod, so you get a really cool bend in the rod whenever you're fighting a big steelhead or salmon. It just fights really awesome. The fight is just fantastic on this rod. So as far as rods go, this is my favorite rod that I like to use for salmon fishing. And then I have it paired up on a 13 Fishing Concept Z bait casting low profile reel, and this is a 7-to-1, I believe. This is a burner reel. Yeah, it's a 7-3-to-1, so it's very good at picking up line, especially if I've been center pin fishing all day with that small 1-to-1. I can definitely switch over to this when my hands get a little tired and be more efficient fishing that way. And traditionally with my bait casting setup, I like to run a shot lead instead of just doing a barrel swivel or a barrel weight or a bullet weight. And on this one I just have a 20-gram Raven float, a fast deep float. But this is pretty much my only bait casting setup I will ever have on me. Once again, this is a 10-6 Shimano convergence stick with a 13 Fishing Concept Z. And I'm sure you guys have seen a few videos with this setup. Alright, this is probably my last float setup that I use pretty regularly. This is a 13-foot, I believe. Let me double check. Oh no, I lied. This is an 11-6. This is a Cabela's Fish Eagle. This is a meat stick, more or less. I'll use this when I'm fishing close quarters and trying to float fish, where I'm doing a lot of regular little casts where your drift doesn't matter as much. It's more or less about the amount of casts and drifts you get through. And on this one, I just have a Mitchell 300 spinning setup. And once again, I have this one spooled up, I think 12-pound Trilene XL. And you'll see that I just use that basic white line again. I don't like using that high vis yellow or orange or reds that people like to run. I get it looks pretty cool on your reels and stuff, but it doesn't do much for me. So once again, I'll run the traditional split shot patterns here, and I'm just using the eared shots because I ran out of the regular round shots. And then once again, I've got it on the fast deep 20 gram Raven float. And I like to run fast deeps a lot because the rivers around where I live are all very fast and deep. If you're fishing a small river, you can use the extra slows, the shallows, but this is what I like to use preferably when I'm float fishing, and they're very small floats. I don't have to have that perfect drift, like a long drift where I would essentially need my center pin or bait caster. So this one traditionally I only use for float fishing. I don't really bottom bounce with this one as well. All right guys, now my very last setup, this is my G Loomis E6X. This is a 9-foot medium fast action rod, and this has to be hands down my favorite bottom bouncing rod I've ever used. It is super sensitive. Any small pickup from a steelhead or a salmon, whether they lightly bite your spawn sack or jig and waxy, you're gonna feel everything on this rod. I have it paired up with a Shimano Nasi. This is a 3000 size. And on this one, I typically don't run anything higher than 10-pound main line on there, because I usually shoot down to 8-pound leader. So this is probably the only setup that I will ever use for bottom bouncing or any type of other application, whether I'm throwing spinners or twitching jigs, anything like that. That is the perfect combo for any of those methods. So like I said guys, these are my 4 go-to setups for salmon and steelhead fishing. I actually got this idea from one of my subscribers down at the river. He asked me what rods I use and how many different setups I have, and he was like, oh, that'd be pretty sweet to make a video and show everyone what you use, what kind of gear you use. So thought I'd put this video out quickly for you guys. I will be going through an in-depth video on how to rig up for float fishing for steelhead. I think that will be very useful to you guys. I've been getting a lot of comments on that as well, on how I rig up, so look out for that video as well. So there you have it guys. Those are my 4 favorite setups for steelhead and salmon. Those are my go-tos. I always have at least 2 of these rods in my hand when I'm out fishing. These are just what I like and what I use. A lot of people may have different preferences. This is what I use and will continue to use. I have no need in buying any $700 rods. This, like I said, this X11 was maybe $100 on sale at a fishing show, and this reel I think maybe runs $250, $260. So yeah guys, with that being said, thanks so much for watching. If you did find this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe and look out for future videos.